At Let's Tell Their Story, we'd like to advise that some content may contain rape, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, child abduction, and murder. Not all content is suitable for all audiences. Please be advised while listening. Thank you. Welcome to Let's Tell Their Story, or welcome back to Let's Tell Their Story. I'm your host, Casey, and we're going to start with our missing person of the week. Our original story will be taking place in Ohio, so let's get to our missing person. Adam Mayer of Columbus, Ohio, has been missing since January 18th, 2024. He is currently 46 years old. He has red auburn hair, is 6 feet tall, weighs 220 pounds, and is a white male. He was last seen walking away from his home in Columbus, Ohio on January 18th, 2024, and he has not been seen or heard from since. He has blue eyes, and he has no distinctive marks such as tattoos or scars. If you have any information on Adam Mayer's whereabouts, please contact Detective Robert Davis at the Columbus Division of Police at 614-645-4545, case number 240-052-068. Now, let's get into the interesting case that I happened to come across, and this one is probably one of the stranger ones that I have done. And yes, I have done some strange cases in the past that have just completely blown me away, but this one just, there's answers without answers, and nobody's actually doing anything about it. So Lorraine Pullen was born April 25th, 1957 to Wanda and Howard Pullen Jr. Together, Lori's parents had 5 children together. There was 4 girls and 1 boy. I remember 1 boy, very important in this whole story. They grew up on a multi-acre property in rural Liberty Township, Ohio. Lorraine went by Lori. She had graduated high school from the Liberty High in June of 1975, and she was planning on making a career out of bookkeeping, and she even contemplated going further into that line of work, into accounting. She even attended the Youngstown State University, working towards that goal of becoming an accountant, but her life goals had changed when she was called upon as a woman to break the glass ceiling in the construction industry, and it was growing loud, and she was all for this. Lori was not one to pull away from a challenge. She grew up basically a tomboy. She was raised around tractors and heavy machinery and whatnot. So her going into a man's world was not something that really would shock any of her family. Sadly, though, on September 13th, 2016, her father, Howard Jr., had died of a heart attack, and he left. We'll get there. We'll get there, because we got to go back on Lori's story, because this story is about Lori, not Howard. Lori was a workhorse. According to her daughter Samantha, Samantha actually wrote that on the page that is dedicated to Lori, quote, "My mother was a workhorse, a tough love mom who wanted nothing more to spend every moment of her retirement with the ones she loved," unquote. In 1976, Lori met a man named Timothy Lynn, and they married in 76. So they may have met before that. They were renting a small home in, I'm going to say it's pronounced Gerard, but it could be Gerard. I'm going to go with Gerard. Before they were able to basically raise enough money that they bought some land in the front of the family farm in the Pullen farmstead. And in 1979, the home was finally completed. When Lori and Tim moved in, they ended up having 2 children, Corinne, who went by Corey, and Samantha, which I mentioned Samantha earlier. And Lori was not one to shy away from getting her hands dirty, so she, like I said, she was called into a man's world to break the glass ceiling. So she went on to get her necessary training to operate heavy machinery. And she began working with the Workers' Local Union 66. This is an extremely dangerous job where they use machines to dig holes and ditches, they grate roads, and install like drainage pipes. And even in some sites, she would have to work with hazardous materials. Now, my husband is a heavy machine operator also, so I understand the challenges and the dangerousness of this job. Her co-workers would say that she had great skills and she really didn't need to be supervised because she would always do the job well done. After 25 years of marriage, Tim and Lori ended up divorcing in 2001. But they stayed on good terms. Such good terms that even Tim continued to live in the home that they built on the Pullen farmstead that was next to Wanda. Lori, she had moved to Ravenna because by then she was employed by the Northern Ohio Paving. And that's, and before that she had worked for Shelley and Sands, a highway construction company, for approximately 15 years. And that is where she met her soon-to-be fiance, Mark Schoonover. She, according to her daughter Corey, she loved Mark. She remembered a day where Lori has shown Corey her engagement ring, and she was ecstatically happy about this. Now, Lori was one that she worked because she wanted to enjoy her retirement. However, she only got 1 year to actually enjoy this. Now, getting back to Lori's father, Howard, when he passed away, his next of kin included his wife, Wanda, and their 5 children. When Howard passed, he had owned several rental buildings and parcels of land. all of those assets were left to Wanda. Lori and her sister Diane, along with their mother Wanda, were in the process of making arrangements with the Geisler Realty to manage the pulling properties because they were having an issue with their brother Chip, which was, he went by Chip, but he was Howard the Third. There were incidents where Chip would use family money for repairs on the rental properties he managed. And then when he was asked to produce like receipts and accounting for the work that he claimed he had done, he couldn't prove those. But he also never deposited the rents he collected into Wanda's bank accounts. It was as though the money had just vanished. And he would always have an excuse. So that was why Diane and Lori and Wanda were working with Geisler Realty to set up the managing things. Now, the agreement was signed on April 11th, 2017, and it would take about 2 weeks when Chip was finally notified that he no longer had any authority over any of the properties. Chip was irate. He called Dan Geisler of the Geisler Realty Group, and he complained. So Wanda decided that Chip could continue with some of the repairs on the properties, but Lori and Dan had made sure to organize everything to keep... They organized everything that Chip would stay in line. But, again, Chip continued to have problems. And he ended up being excluded from repair work, and he was finally fully kicked out of anything that involved their father's properties. Now, this is where things get complicated, I could say. Not that they haven't already been complicated, and Chip sounds like a real Chip off the old block, huh? Okay, sorry, that was bad. On May 29th, 2017, one of those properties was sold, and it was sold for $15,000. That was to go to Wanda's bank account under Geisler Realty as part of their continued property management agreement. And that was the same day that Chip had called Dan and threatened that he was going to get a lawyer and sue Dan and Geisler Realty. But Dan really wasn't fretting too much about this. He basically welcomed the threats from Chip and said, basically, go ahead. You're not going to get anywhere. And this was all because Chip was demanding that Dan would transfer the money to Chip. And that was just not going to happen. So on August 1st of 2017... Lori left her house and she had traveled to Liberty Township where she was going to pick up her mom, and they were going to get some of the property paperwork in order. They had planned to go to the county records office together and basically update the records for one of the family properties. So on her way, Lori called Wanda 9 times, and not once did Wanda answer. Now, why didn't Wanda answer? Well, there's actually a reason behind that. Lori wouldn't have known that Chip and his wife Kim had earlier that day picked up Wanda, and they had headed over to their family attorney's office to close the deal on one of Wanda's properties. Remember that property I was talking about that was $15,000? Well, Chip ended up receiving a check for $15,000 for the sale of the property, and on August 3rd, he deposited that check. None of the other family members were aware of this deal. So Lori eventually makes it to Wanda's house, and she was driving her white Nissan SUV. She was incredibly proud of this car and intended to keep it for the rest of her life because it was new. Lori was seen on the surveillance camera footage. She was pulled into the driveway. She stayed for about 30 minutes, and when she left, she had papers in her hand. When she left the residence, she turned in the direction of where Chip lived, which was 3 houses south of the original farmstead. And that would be the last time that Lori would be seen on security cameras. But something odd happened about 30 minutes later. There is a brief, extremely brief footage of Lori's Nissan SUV coming into the driveway at 1:14 p.m. But it doesn't continue down the driveway. The car turns like off-road and drives in the grass around the property and behind the barn. And all of this is off of trying to say how this is. Okay, so the security footage only caught that brief moment her car passes through, and the rest of it, there is no cameras footage anywhere of her car. Now, it took Samantha and Diane 50 or 60 times of watching this video surveillance footage before they caught that glimpse of the car at 1:14 p.m. Now, everybody in the family knew where these cameras were located, so there was really no reason for Lori to avoid the cameras. So why would she go out of her way to avoid the cameras? Well, it's speculated that Lori probably wasn't the one driving her car. And there was, according to Samantha, there was only a handful of people that knew where the cameras were. So they would be the ones to know how to avoid them. At 1:47 p.m., Lori gets a call on her cell phone, but it goes unanswered. And every text and call from that moment on was never answered. So where did Lori go, and what has happened to her? And by that evening, her fiance Mark is getting very concerned that Lori hasn't shown back up, and he calls the local police department in Brimfield Township, and he reports Lori missing. As well as Samantha, she contacts the Liberty Township Police Department, and she reports Lori missing as well. The next morning, Tim, Lori's ex-husband, he drives over to to Wanda's house. He goes into the house and looks around, and he doesn't see Wanda. Wanda's on the phone with Chip's wife, Kim. After a brief conversation Tim has with Wanda and Kim, he goes outside and he runs out not runs outside, but he meets Chip outside. And this was about 7 a.m. on August 2nd. So they start walking the property, and they come across a car that's sticking out from behind the barn, and it just so happens to be Wanda's Nissan SUV. It's strangely parked in the construction debris. Basically, this is where anybody that's been on a farm or grew up on a farm, there's always that one area that you throw the debris, basically the burn pile and whatnot. Her car had been parked there, but yet she was so proud of this car that she had just had it washed, and there was no reason that Lori would ever had parked her car in that spot. So I need to back up because my notes are all messed up. Tim actually noticed Lori's car before he went into the house to look around, because he assumed that Lori was in the house, but why her car was parked where it was at is beyond him. Then when he stepped outside, he met Chip, and they went back behind the barn to take a closer look to why the situation of the car. There was also broken glass and in this area, so there is no reason for her to ever park her car there. She would have parked in the driveway. And Chip made a comment that the tractor was also missing. So they keep looking and eventually Chip goes, "Oh, there is the tractor." Okay, well, this is over by the pond on the property, and as they looked a little closer, Tim notices that Lori is sitting on the tractor seat, but her head and shoulders are submerged in the water. Now remember, she was a heavy equipment operator and she grew up on tractors. So was this a farm accident that it has allegedly been named? It's a pretty big red flag to me. So Tim probably still cares for Lori since they've got 2 kids together. He remembered going to get the brush hog, and he was going to try and get Lori out, but then Chip basically yells, "Don't touch anything," and this confused him. And he responded with, "There's your sister. That's your sister." They ended up calling the EMTs and whatnot, and eventually Chief Tesson arrived, and he observed the scene at for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. And then he basically came to the family, and he suggested that Lori hit her head, lost consciousness, and went into the water. Now, the Liberty Township Police Department, they were not aware of the cameras that were on the residence, and the family disagreed that it was too quickly ruled a farm accident death. So Corey and Samantha, they went so far as they would place several frantic 911 calls after they had heard of Lori's death, because they were very concerned that foul play was involved. And they felt that everything on their perspective would be valuable to the police, but they were never once interviewed. Bob Friedrich, a former FBI agent, and a current private investigator is working on the case, and he has been quick to note that there was something odd about a farm accident theory, because Lori, she was a heavy equipment operator for over 30 years. So the probability of her accidentally being involved in a tractor accident, nope, not gonna happen. Even her co-workers said there was no way Lori would have driven the tractor into the family pond. There was absolutely no way. Even Diane Pullen, she never believed that Lori had died in an accident. However, 6 months later, so somebody was paying attention to something somewhere along the line. Samantha and Diane, they watched hours of that farm surveillance video, and that's when they caught that glimpse of Lori's car returning to the house. Like I said earlier, they watched it 50 or 60 times over and over and over again, and that's when they saw a small glimpse that turned sharp left. So this is when the family contacted the Forensic Engineering PLLC to basically evaluate the death scene. They specifically wanted the accident investigated, so they went over this tractor with a fine-tooth comb and realized that there was no possible malfunctions, that everything with the tractor was mechanically sound. The principal engineer, Thomas Baker, he basically said that the tractor was in perfect working order. There was no defects that prevented the tractor from being stopped or steered by the operator, and that the track was running normal before the accident. Now, here's the strange part of this. About the same timing as the forensic engineer investigation was going on, Chip was attempting to make some changes to Wanda's will. He had discussions with Diane that he wanted to remove Lori's children, Corey and Samantha, from Wanda's will, because it was current that Wanda's will stated that should any of my children as named above precede me, leaving children surviving, each child or children shall take the share of the deceased parent as if the deceased parent should have survived me, unquote. So he was trying to get Samantha and Corey written out of the will so they wouldn't receive anything. Sounds like Chip is just really money hungry. Diane was like flabbergasted by this. So on March 9th, 2018, and with the new facts of the tractor and the footage from the cameras, the coroner ruled Lori's death as a homicide. Now, the coroner had discovered that Lori had actually died of asphyxiation because there was no water in her lungs from the pond. So this would indicate that Lori was dead before she entered the water. And it ruled out any ideas that she had hit her head and drowned. There was also multiple lacerations and contusions on her head and face, which wouldn't be wounds that had came from the tractor, but more likely wounds that would come from an attack. So as soon as Lori's manner of death was declared a homicide, Chip didn't take any time at all to stop talking to the police, and he insisted on hiring a prominent Cleveland criminal defense attorney. He said and promised he would take a polygraph test, but he refused to take it. Then he has the audacity to tell the 3 News Investigates, quote, "I have not been able to grieve because of all the allegations," unquote. He denied having any involvement. However, I'm not gonna say he does, but we can all figure that one out for ourselves. Bob Friedrich and Lori's family, they do believe that there were witnesses, and they are too afraid to come forward. There is a $20,000 reward offered for any information leading to the conviction that will inspire someone to speak up. If you have any information about the murder of Lori Lynn, please share what you know. You can remain anonymous. You can email leads at whokilledlorilynn.com. Call the tip line at 330-539-9830. Or you can fill out the Google form at the official website of Lori's case, which is whokilledlorilynn.com. And that is the tragic farm accident of Lori Pauline Lynn. You guys have a great day, night, morning, whenever you're listening to this. You guys, thank you for your time. You guys are beautiful. And until next time, stay safe, but stay curious.